The soft, melodic notes drifted down the marble hallway, a ghost of a sound in a house that was usually filled with a crushing, opulent silence. It was a lullaby, simple and sweet, weaving through the cold air like a thread of gold. Dante Volkov froze, his hand on the handle of his study door. Every muscle in his body went rigid. It was impossible. A song buried for 30 years, a melody that existed only in the deepest, most fractured recesses of his memory, a song that belonged to a ghost. He moved without conscious thought, his expensive Italian shoes making no sound on the polished floors. The sound grew stronger as he approached his son's bedroom. Leo, his 5-year-old boy, a miniature version of himself, with eyes that held a sorrow too old for his face. Dante was a phantom in his son's life, a provider of everything except what the boy actually needed. He stopped in the doorway, a hulking shadow against the soft light from the hallway. Inside, the new nanny was sitting on the edge of Leo's bed. Her back was to him, her form silhouetted by the single lamp she'd left on. Leo was in his bed, his small body finally relaxed, his eyes closed. And she was singing, Jajong, Jajong, Uri Aga. The Korean words were a punch to his soul. They were soft, flawlessly pronounced, and they unearthed a grief so profound he felt his knees weaken. His mother. Her face was a blur, a watercolor painting left out in the rain. But her voice and this song were all he had left of her. He watched, paralyzed, as the nanny brushed a gentle hand over Leo's forehead. His son, who hadn't slept through the night in months, who fought sleep as if it were an enemy, was peaceful. He was safe. She finished the verse, her voice trailing off into a hum. She thought he was asleep. She started to rise, and that's when Dante found his voice. It came out as a serrated whisper, a sound more wounded than threatening, but it sliced through the quiet room like broken glass. "Where did you learn that song?" Ilara Vance spun around, a startled gasp escaping her lips. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild bird in a cage. He was just there. A towering figure of darkness filling the doorway, his face obscured by shadow. Mr. Volkov, her new, terrifyingly intense employer. She had been so careful, tiptoeing around him for the past 3 weeks, feeling his gaze on her even when he wasn't in the room. I'm sorry, she stammered, her hand flying to her chest. I didn't hear you. He took a step into the room, and the light caught the hard planes of his face. His expression wasn't angry. It was something far more unsettling. It was stripped bare, raw, a look of desperate, agonizing confusion. The control he normally wore like a bespoke suit was gone. The song, he repeated, his voice low and guttural. He took another step closer. Tell me where you learned it. Now. 3 months earlier, Ilara's world had been a different kind of terrifying. It was the terror of the mundane, of watching her bank account dwindle to double digits 2 days after her rent check cleared. New York City was a relentless beast, and it was chewing her up and spitting her out. She worked 40 hours a week as a waitress, navigating a minefield of grabby hands and condescending smiles, and another 20 hours stocking shelves at a bookstore that smelled of dust and decaying dreams. Her own dream of finishing her degree in social work felt like a distant, mocking star. Another rejection, she said, tossing a crumpled letter onto the small, wobbly table in her shared apartment. It was a grant application. Denied. Her roommate, Chloe, a whirlwind of vibrant scarves and impossible optimism, picked it up and smoothed it out. Their loss. They don't deserve your brilliant, bleeding heart. My bleeding heart is about to get us evicted, Ilara muttered, collapsing onto their lumpy sofa. I need a miracle, Chloe, or a winning lottery ticket. Chloe tapped an ad on her laptop screen, which was propped open on a stack of art history books. How about this instead? It's not the lottery, but it's close. Ilara leaned over. The ad was sparse, almost arrogantly so. Private nanny sought for 5-year-old boy. Upper East Side residence, demanding position, discretion essential, salary commensurate with challenges. There was a number and nothing else. Right, because I'm exactly who some rich family on the Upper East Side is looking for, Ilara scoffed. They want someone with a degree in child psychology from Switzerland, not a community college dropout who smells like French fries and desperation. Don't sell yourself short, Chloe insisted. You're amazing with kids. You practically raised your younger brothers. And discretion essential just means they're famous or weird. You can handle weird. And look, salary commensurate with challenges is rich people code for we will pay you an obscene amount of money to deal with our demon spawn. Ilara stared at the ad. It was a long shot, a shot in the dark on a moonless night, but desperation was a powerful motivator. She picked up her phone. Dante Volkov despised the hiring process. It was a parade of fakes, women with plastic smiles and hollow eyes, all reciting the same lines from the same childcare handbooks. They looked at his son, Leo, and saw a project. They looked at him and saw a blank check. None of them saw the frightened little boy drowning in a silent house, or the man who was just as lost. She's the 7th one this month, Dante, Marco, his second-in-command and only friend, said, reviewing a file. This one has a master's from Yale and speaks 4 languages. She's perfect on paper. Paper can be burned, Dante said, staring out the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse. The city sprawled below him, a glittering, indifferent beast. His beast. He owned a significant part of it, the dark, beating heart of it that most people pretended didn't exist. The Volkov Syndicate wasn't just a business, it was a kingdom built on his father's sins, and he was the reluctant king. Leo needs stability, Marco pressed gently. He needs someone who will stay. He needs a mother, Dante said, the words tasting like ash. His wife, Katerina, had been a business arrangement, a merger of 2 powerful families. There had been no love, only duty. Her death in a car crash a year ago had been a tragedy, but the grief he felt was for his son, who had lost the only maternal figure he'd ever known, however detached she had been. The next candidate is here, Marco announced, glancing at his watch. Ilara Vance, no formal qualifications to speak of. Waitress. Some community college credits. Honestly, I'm not sure why HR even let her through. Send her in, Dante said, turning from the window. He was tired, so deeply, existentially tired. The moment Ilara walked into the room, the air changed. It was like a window had been thrown open in a crypt. She wasn't dressed to impress. She wore simple black pants and a clean, faded blue blouse. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail and her face was free of makeup. She looked completely out of place in the sterile, multi-million-dollar room. And then her eyes met his. For Dante, it was like a physical blow, a sudden, violent stilling of the world. Her eyes weren't just brown, they were a complex tapestry of defiance, weariness, and a fierce, unyielding light. There was no artifice in them, no fear, just an honest, appraising stare that seemed to see right through the expensive suit, the power, the reputation. It saw the man inside, the one he kept locked away. He felt seen for the first time in his entire life. The world, which had been gray for so long, suddenly had a single point of vibrant color, her. Ilara felt his stare like a brand. It was the most intense, unnerving thing she had ever experienced. This was Mr. Volkov. He was younger than she expected, maybe in his early 30s, and devastatingly handsome in a way that was almost violent. A sharp jaw, dark hair, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. A faint, silvery scar cut through his left eyebrow, a tiny imperfection that only made his face more intimidating. He didn't just look at her, he consumed her, his gaze a physical weight. Creepy, rich weirdo, her mind screamed. Run. But she was tired of running. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze head-on. She had nothing to lose. Mr. Volkov, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Dante didn't answer for a long moment. He was still caught in the tractor beam of her gaze. Marco cleared his throat, a subtle reminder that this was an interview. "Miss Vance," Dante finally said, his voice a low rumble. He gestured to a chair that probably cost more than her car. "Please." She sat. The interview was a blur. Marco asked the standard questions. She answered them honestly. She talked about her experience with her brothers, about her belief that children needed honesty and respect more than schedules and structured play. All the while, Dante Volkov just watched her, his silence more potent than any question. Finally, he spoke. "My son has not spoken a full sentence in 6 months. He has dismissed every nanny, every therapist. They all fail. Why would you be any different?" The question was a test, a challenge. "Because I won't treat him like he's broken," Ilara said simply. "He's a little boy whose world fell apart. He doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be heard, even if he's not talking." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Marco looked at Dante, an expression of disbelief on his face. This was not the answer they got from the Yale graduates. Dante stood up. "Marco, show Miss Vance out. Settle the details with her. The job is hers." Ilara blinked. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Dante confirmed, his eyes never leaving hers. "You start Monday." As Marco led her out, her mind was reeling. It was insane. It was a mistake. But as Marco named a salary figure that made her jaw drop, she knew she couldn't refuse. This wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline, a dangerous, strange, and possibly life-altering lifeline. She would take it. She would deal with the creepy, intense billionaire and his silent son. How hard could it be? It was harder than she could have ever imagined. The penthouse was a museum, beautiful and lifeless. Leo was a ghost within it. He was a beautiful child with his father's dark hair and a heartbreakingly delicate face, but his eyes were empty. He didn't respond to her greetings. He didn't play with the mountain of expensive toys in his room. He just sat, staring into space, a perfect porcelain doll of a boy. For the first week, Ilara felt like she was talking to a wall. She didn't push. She just existed in his space, narrating her day, reading books aloud to an empty room, building block towers that he would never touch. She ate her meals with him in the vast, silent kitchen, talking about the food, the weather, anything to fill the void. Dante was an even more unnerving presence. He was rarely there, but she felt him everywhere. In the way the household staff deferred to her with a new, fearful respect. In the black car that was suddenly at her disposal, which she pointedly refused to use. He would appear at odd hours, a silent storm in a $3,000 suit, his eyes finding her immediately. He'd watch her for a moment, a complicated, unreadable emotion in his gaze, before disappearing into his study. The breakthrough with Leo came on a rainy Tuesday. Ilara was sitting on the floor of his room, building a city out of Legos. "And this," she announced to the silent boy, "is the tallest tower in all of Legoland. It's where the grumpy king lives. He's very rich and has all the Legos in the world, but he's super lonely because he doesn't know how to talk to anyone." She glanced at Leo. He was watching her. Really watching her. His eyes were fixed on the tower. "He's not grumpy," a tiny voice whispered. Ilara's heart stopped. She didn't dare look at him too quickly. She kept her eyes on the tower. "He's not? He looks grumpy." "He's just sad," Leo whispered. He crawled over, his small hand hovering over the tower. He picked up a single red block and placed it on top. "It needs a light, so people can find him." Tears pricked Ilara's eyes. She blinked them away fiercely. "That's a very good idea," she said, her voice thick. "A very good idea." From that day on, the ice began to melt. Leo started talking, first in whispers, then in full sentences. He showed her his favorite books. He even laughed, a sound so pure and beautiful it made Ilara's chest ache. She was breaking through. She was bringing the little boy back from the shadows. Dante saw the change. He started coming home earlier. He would find excuses to walk through the living room when she was playing with Leo on the floor. He started joining them for dinner. The first time he sat down at the kitchen table with them, the tension was so thick Ilara could barely breathe. "Leo told me you're building a city," Dante said, his voice startlingly gentle when directed at his son. "It's our city," Leo said, not looking at his father. "Ilara said I'm the chief architect." "Is that so?" Dante's eyes flickered to Ilara. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was a devastating sight. It was like watching a statue crack open and reveal something human inside. "He has a real talent for it," Ilara said, her voice a little too bright. "A future in urban planning, maybe." "My father wanted me to be an architect," Dante said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. It was a piece of himself he had never offered anyone. "What happened?" Ilara asked, her curiosity overriding her caution. His face shuddered immediately. The smile vanished. "Life happened," he said, his tone flat and final. The wall was back up. Despite his coldness, Ilara found herself increasingly drawn to the puzzle of Dante Volkov. She saw the way he looked at his son, a mixture of profound love and helpless distance. She saw the loneliness in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. There was a deep well of pain in him, and her bleeding heart, the one Chloe always teased her about, couldn't help but ache for him. He tried to give her things: a new phone, a clothing allowance at Bergdorf's, a lease on a luxury apartment in her name. She refused every single time. "This is creepy," she told him bluntly one evening after his assistant had tried to hand her the keys to a brand new Mercedes. "You can't just buy me." He had her cornered in the kitchen, his large frame blocking her exit. "It's not about buying you," he said, his voice a low growl of frustration. "It's about providing, keeping you safe." "I've been keeping myself safe my whole life, Mr. Volkov," she shot back, her chin tilted in defiance. "I don't need your help." "Dante," he said. "What?" "My name is Dante. Call me Dante." The request was so simple, so unexpectedly personal, it disarmed her completely. Okay, Dante." "Is it so difficult to accept help, Ilara?" he asked, his voice softening. "It's difficult to accept control," she corrected. "And all this," she gestured around the vast, sterile kitchen, "feels like control." A flicker of something, was it hurt? Crossed his face before it was replaced by his usual impassive mask. "I just want to make your life easier." "My life is my own," she said softly. "The easy parts and the hard parts. I wouldn't trade any of it." He stared at her, and for a moment she thought he understood. He was a man who had never had a choice, who had been born into a life he was forced to lead. Her fierce grip on her own autonomy must have seemed like an alien concept. He was falling, and he didn't know how to stop it. Dante felt like a man walking in the desert who had just stumbled upon an oasis. Ilara was everything his world was not: warm, genuine, fiercely principled. She had brought his son back to life, and in doing so, she had shown him the gaping, hollow wound in his own soul. He became obsessed with her. He had his security team run a deep background check, and what he found only deepened his fascination. She was adopted, raised by a loving, working-class family. She had put her own dreams on hold to support them. She volunteered at a soup kitchen on her one day off. She was good, purely, incandescently good, and he was not. He was the head of a criminal empire. His hands were stained with things she couldn't even imagine. The money that paid her salary, that kept this penthouse gleaming, was born from darkness. He knew he should let her go for her own sake. But he was a selfish man. He couldn't. He wanted her light to himself. He wanted to see if it was powerful enough to chase away his own shadows. He started to open up in small, fractured ways. He told her about his childhood, about a lonely boy in a big house with an absent father and a mother who was a beautiful, sad mystery. "She disappeared when I was 7, he said one night as they sat in the living room after Leo was asleep. It was the most he had ever shared. "Disappeared?" Ilara asked gently. "She left. That's what my father told me, that she didn't want this life. that she didn't want me. The last word was barely audible, a confession of a wound that had never healed. Ilara's heart broke for the little boy he must have been. "I'm so sorry, Dante." He just shrugged as if it were nothing, but she saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. It was in these moments of vulnerability that she felt herself slipping. The fear and intimidation were slowly being replaced by a dangerous, treacherous empathy. She was starting to see the man behind the monster, and she was starting to fall for him. Which brought them to this night, to the lullaby. The silence in Leo's room was absolute, broken only by the sound of her own frantic heartbeat. Dante stood before her, his face a mask of raw, unguarded emotion. The power, the control, it was all gone. In its place was a terrifying vulnerability. "The song," he repeated, his voice strained. "Where did you learn it?" She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. It's just a lullaby. My mother used to sing it to me." "Your mother?" His eyes narrowed, searching her face. "Is she Korean?" "No, I don't know. I was adopted," Ilara explained, her words tumbling out. "My mom, my adoptive mom, she was a nurse. She worked at a long-term care facility years ago. There was a patient there, a woman, a Jane Doe. She'd been in some kind of accident, had a traumatic brain injury. She had amnesia, couldn't remember her name, her family, anything." Dante's breath hitched. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. Ilara continued, her voice soft. "My mom said she was so gentle, so sad. She never spoke much, but she would hum. And sometimes she would sing that song. It was the only thing she seemed to remember. My mom learned it from her. After she passed away, my mom started singing it to me. She said it was a way of keeping a part of her alive." Dante sank onto the edge of Leo's bed, his head in his hands. A tremor ran through his powerful frame. Ilara had never seen him like this. He was completely undone. "Dante, are you okay?" she whispered, taking a hesitant step toward him. He looked up, and his eyes were glistening with unshed tears. The sight was so shocking it stole her breath. "That woman," he said, his voice thick with a grief that was 30 years old. "That patient, she had a small crescent-shaped scar on her right wrist from a childhood burn." Ilara's mind flashed back to a story her mother had told her 100 times. "Yes," she breathed. "My mom always said it looked like a tiny little moon." A strangled sob escaped Dante's throat. It was the sound of a heart breaking open. "That was my mother," he whispered. "Her name was Minjun, and that was her song. It was our song." The world tilted on its axis. Ilara felt the floor drop out from under her. His mother, the nameless woman from her mother's stories, the source of the lullaby that had soothed her to sleep as a child. It was impossible. It was fate. "My father," Dante continued, his voice hardening, the grief now laced with a cold, terrifying fury. "He said she left. He lied. The accident—" "It wasn't an accident. She was trying to leave him. She was trying to take me with her. He couldn't have that. He couldn't have the wife of the head of the Volkov family simply walk away. So he had her taken. He had her erased." The name hung in the air. Volkov. She had heard whispers among the staff, seen the fear in the eyes of men who came to the penthouse for hushed meetings. She had willfully ignored it, telling herself it was just business. "The Volkov family?" she asked, her voice trembling. And then came the confession. The dam broke. He told her everything. He told her about the syndicate, the logistics and import empire that was a front for gun running, money laundering, and things she couldn't even fathom. He told her about his father, a cruel, ruthless man who had forged this dark kingdom. He told her how he had inherited it, a crown of thorns he was forced to wear. "This is my life, Ilara," he said, his eyes pleading with her, begging her to understand. "It's a cage. I was born in it. I thought there was no way out. But then you came here. You walked into my life, and you You brought the ghost of my mother with you. You brought light into this house. You gave me back my son." He stood up and took her hands. His were cold as ice. "I'm falling in love with you, Ilara. I know I have no right. I know what I am. But with you, I feel like I could be someone else. I feel hope." His words were a beautiful, poisoned arrow to her heart. Love. He loved her. And in the deepest, most secret part of her soul, she knew she loved him too. But his confession had changed everything. The puzzle of Dante Volkov was solved, and the final picture was a nightmare. He was a criminal, a mafia boss. The money she was paid, the roof over Leo's head, the very air in this opulent prison, it was all tainted. It was blood money. Every principle she held dear, everything she believed in screamed at her. Her work in social services, her desire to help people, it was all a mockery in the face of this reality. She couldn't be a part of it. She couldn't let herself love a man like this. She couldn't raise a child in this world of violence and shadows. She pulled her hands from his. The loss of contact was a physical pain. "I can't," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Dante, I can't." The hope in his eyes died. It was extinguished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a familiar, bleak emptiness. "Don't," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Don't leave. I can protect you. I can give you anything." "That's the problem," she cried, her voice rising with anguish. "You think everything can be bought or controlled or protected, but my soul isn't for sale. My principles aren't for sale." "This isn't about money," he insisted, stepping toward her again. "Isn't it?" she shot back, taking a step back. "This entire building is a monument to it, to power, to the things you do to get it. I saw the way those men look at you. They're afraid of you. And I should be too." "Are you?" he asked, his voice soft and wounded. "Are you afraid of me?" "Yes," she lied, though the real truth was more complicated. She was afraid of what he was, but she wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of how much she loved him despite it all. "I have to go." She turned and fled the room, his devastated silence chasing her down the hall. She didn't stop. She ran to her small, sterile room, her hands shaking so badly she could barely work the zipper on her bag. She threw her few belongings inside. Her principles were all she had. They were the bedrock of her identity. If she stayed, she would lose herself. She was almost at the door when he appeared, blocking her path. He wasn't pleading anymore. His face was a mask of cold desperation. "Don't do this, Ilara." "I have to," she said, clutching the strap of her bag like a shield. "Think about Leo. What kind of life will he have? Will he grow up to be like you, like your father? He deserves better. He deserves a chance at a normal life." It was a low blow, and she knew it. It hit its mark. The fight went out of him, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He had no answer for that. It was his greatest fear. "Please," he whispered one last time, a raw, naked plea. "Goodbye, Dante," she said, her heart shattering into a million pieces. She pushed past him and walked toward the private elevator, not daring to look back. If she looked back, she would stay. And if she stayed, she was lost. The elevator doors slid shut, encasing her in a silent, mirrored box. She saw her own reflection, her face pale and streaked with tears. She had made the right choice, the only choice. So why did it feel like she had just ripped out her own heart? The world outside the penthouse was just as she had left it, but it felt different. It felt gray. Ilara moved through the next few weeks in a fog of misery. She went back to her old apartment, back to her waitressing job. Chloe was supportive, holding her while she cried, telling her she was brave, that she had done the right thing. Her mother, when Ilara called and gave her a heavily edited version of events, was simply relieved. "I knew that world was no good for you, honey. You're safe now." But she didn't feel safe. She felt amputated. A vital part of her had been left behind in that gilded cage. She ached for Leo with a physical intensity that stole her breath. She missed his laughter, his quiet observations, the warmth of his small hand in hers. And Dante. God, she missed Dante. She hated herself for it. She would be pouring coffee for a customer and his face would flash in her mind. Not the intimidating kingpin, but the broken man confessing his love, the lost boy mourning his mother. She would lie awake at night, the memory of his voice, his touch, his devastatingly rare smile haunting her. She had chosen her principles, but the cost was a gaping hole in her life that nothing could fill. For Dante, Ilara's departure was not a closing door. It was the collapse of the entire building. The light she had brought into his life was gone, and the darkness that rushed in to fill the void was colder and more absolute than before. The penthouse was once again a silent, sterile tomb. Worse, Leo had retreated back into his shell. He was silent again, his eyes holding a new, knowing sadness. He didn't ask where Ilara had gone. He seemed to understand, in the profound way that children do, that she was gone forever. He stopped building his Lego city. The red block he had placed on the tower, the light to help people find the sad king, lay on the floor, forgotten. Dante's uncle, Dmitri Volkov, a relic of his father's era, was pleased. Good riddance, he'd grunted over a glass of whiskey in Dante's study. A girl like that, a nobody, she was making you soft. Now, you can focus. There is business to attend to. The Petrov family is making a move on our shipping lanes. Dante looked at his uncle, at his cold, predatory eyes, and saw his own future. He saw a life of endless conflict, of watching his back, of being a king on a throne of blood and fear. And he saw Leo growing up in that shadow, eventually becoming him. The thought was unbearable. Ilara's words echoed in his mind. He deserves better. He deserves a chance at a normal life. She was right. He had offered her protection, wealth, a world she didn't want. But she had given him something far more valuable, a mirror, and he was horrified by the man he saw reflected in it. He looked at his empire, the legacy of his father, and for the first time, he saw it not as a source of power, but as a disease. A cancer that had killed his mother and was slowly killing him and his son. That night, he made a decision. A tectonic shift occurred deep within him. He would not become his father. He would not let his son become him. He was going to do the impossible. He was going to burn it all down. "We're going legitimate," Dante announced to Marco the next day. Marco, who had seen Dante through his darkest moods, simply stared at him. "Dante, you can't just flip a switch. The syndicate is not a corner store you can just sell. It's a living thing. It has teeth, jaws. It will eat you alive if you try to dismantle it." "Then let it try," Dante said, his voice laced with a resolve Marco had never heard before. It wasn't the cold resolve of a boss giving an order. It was the fiery resolve of a man fighting for his soul. "Start the process. Liquidate the offshore accounts. Sell the assets we can't clean. Cut ties with the Petrovs, the Chengs, all of them. I want every dirty dollar out of our books. We'll focus on the legitimate holdings, real estate, tech investments. We'll build from there, something clean." "Dmitri will start a war," Marco warned. "The old guard will never stand for this." "I know," Dante said, his gaze hard as steel. "That's a war I'm willing to fight." The next 6 months were hell. Just as Marco predicted, Dmitri and the old guard saw Dante's move as the ultimate betrayal. There were threats, attempts on his life, a bombing at one of his warehouses. It was a bloody, brutal civil war fought in the shadows of the city. But Dante was relentless. He was fighting for more than just a company. He was fighting for a future he could barely imagine, a future where he could look his son in the eye without shame. A future where he might, one day, be worthy of the woman who had walked away from him. He didn't contact Ilara. This wasn't a grand gesture to win her back. It was a penance. It was a transformation he had to undergo for himself, for his son. He had to become the man she believed could exist before he could ever dare to enter her life again. Ilara had found a job at a community center in the Bronx, helping underprivileged kids with their homework. The pay was a pittance compared to what Dante had paid her, but the work filled a small part of the hole in her heart. It was meaningful. It was right. She was walking home one crisp autumn evening, the leaves crunching under her boots, when a familiar black sedan pulled up beside her. Her heart leaped into her throat. The back door opened and Dante got out. He looked different. He was still impeccably dressed, but the predatory tension in his shoulders was gone. There were new lines of exhaustion around his eyes, but his gaze was clear. The storm was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady calm. "Ilara," he said. Her name on his lips was still a physical blow. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, her grocery bag clutched to her chest. "What are you doing here, Dante?" "I'm not here to ask you for anything," he said quickly, holding up a hand as if to ward off her defenses. I wanted you to know. You were right. About everything." He told her what he had done. He spoke of the war with his uncle, the process of cleaning his house, of building something new from the ashes of his father's empire. He told her Dmitri was gone, exiled. He told her the Volkov name was now tied to a legitimate investment firm, not a syndicate. "It's not perfect," he said, his gaze unwavering. "The past will always be there. But the future, it's clean. It's mine. And it will be Leo's. I did it because you showed me it was possible. You showed me there was another way to live. I just wanted to thank you for that." He looked like he was about to get back in the car, to leave her on the sidewalk with this earth-shattering revelation. He had changed his entire world. Not for her, but because of her. The distinction was everything. And then the other back door opened. A small figure scrambled out, a flash of dark hair and a familiar blue coat. "Ilara!" Leo ran to her, his arms wrapping around her legs in a desperate hug. He buried his face in her coat. "I missed you," he mumbled, his voice thick with emotion. It was the final crack in her armor. All the walls she had so carefully constructed, all the principles and the pain, they crumbled to dust. She dropped her grocery bag, its contents spilling onto the pavement, and knelt, wrapping her arms around the little boy she loved like her own. Tears streamed down her face as she held him tight. She looked up at Dante, who was watching them with an expression of profound, heartbreaking tenderness. He had done it. He had actually done it. He had chosen the light. She stood up, still holding Leo's hand, and walked toward him. She didn't say a word. She simply reached up, cupped his face in her hands, and pulled him down to her. The kiss was not gentle. It was a collision. It was months of pain, of longing, of misery, and hope poured into a single, desperate moment. It was the taste of forgiveness, of second chances, of a future she had never dared to dream of. It was the reunion of two fractured souls who had found their way back to each other, not by chance, but by choice. His choice to change, and her choice to finally believe in him. When they finally broke apart, breathless, she rested her forehead against his. Leo was holding both their hands, a small, warm link between them. "Come home, Ilara," Dante whispered, his voice rough with emotion. This time, the word home didn't sound like a cage. It sounded like a promise. "Okay," she whispered back. "Okay." 2 years later, home was a sprawling house in Westchester, surrounded by trees instead of skyscrapers. It was filled with light and laughter. The priceless art from the penthouse had been replaced with Leo's framed drawings and photos of the three of them at the beach, in the park, living a life that was startlingly, beautifully normal. Dante was no longer a kingpin. He was the CEO of the Volkov Group, a firm that was as respected as it was profitable. The work was still demanding, but he was home for dinner every night. He was a father. He taught Leo how to ride a bike and helped him with his math homework. He looked at Ilara with a love so profound it still sometimes stole her breath away. Ilara had never finished her social work degree. Instead, she had found a better use for her bleeding heart. She was the director of the Volkov Foundation, a charitable organization funded by a significant portion of the company's profits. It built community centers, funded scholarships, and helped families in need. She was changing the world in a way she had always dreamed of, with the resources she had once scorned. On Sunday afternoons, they would sometimes drive to a small, quiet cemetery. There was a simple headstone there, one they had placed themselves. It read, Minjun, a mother remembered. There was no family name, no dates, just a name reclaimed from the shadows. Dante would stand silently, his hand resting on the cool stone, a quiet communion with the ghost who had haunted him for so long. Leo, now a chatty 7-year-old, would place a small bouquet of wildflowers at the base, and Alara, with her arms wrapped around her husband, would softly hum the Korean lullaby, the song of a lost mother, a song of impossible connections, a song that had guided two lost souls through the darkness and into the light, a song that had, against all odds, led them home. This story teaches us that true strength isn't found in power or control, but in the courage to change. It shows that love's true purpose isn't just to accept someone as they are, but to inspire them to become the best version of themselves. Dante's journey from a life of darkness to one of light wasn't just for Alara, but was a testament to the idea that it's never too late to rewrite your own story, and that redemption is possible for anyone willing to fight for it. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. If this story of love, sacrifice, and redemption moved you, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing to our channel for more content like this, and sharing it with someone who appreciates a powerful story. What did you think of Alara's choice to leave? Was it an act of self-preservation or a necessary catalyst for Dante's transformation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And now we want to hear from you for our next story. Should we explore the story of Marco, the loyal second-in-command, and a dangerous mission from his past that comes back to haunt him? Or would you prefer to see the story of Chloe, Alara's optimistic best friend, who finds herself unexpectedly falling for a mysterious artist with a secret identity? Vote in the poll or leave your choice in the comments.